Congressman Walsh, Attorney General Eric Holder, back again, testifying this time before your committee. I've got to ask you, did he help himself at all today?
No, I think the more he continues to, every time he appears and every time he talks about this subject, I think they tend to dig a bigger hole. I mean, my major walkaways from the hearing today are that it's clear that the Justice Department, mid-level folks and higher-up folks had greater knowledge of Fast and Furious than has been previously recognized. They continue down this track of just trying to blend the Bush and Obama administrations in, talking about gun walking that's happened the last 5 years. There's just a real effort at stonewalling here. Darrell Issa and a number of other members brought up the fact that his own inspector general, they've turned over 80,000 some documents to the inspector general. In Congress, we've only received 6,000 documents, and many of them have been redacted. Just a real lack of accountability, and that continued today.
And I think that's a very important word because many of you brought that up. The whole issue of accountability, how he sits there and he continues to say, I didn't get that memo. I didn't read that. I didn't know about that. I mean, what does that say about who's running the Justice Department?
Well, it raises questions about who's running the department, but it also just raises fundamental leadership questions. I mean, he testified today that he'd accept accountability, and maybe there'd be talk about his resignation based on his actions, on what he knew and when. But he seems divorced from any accountability for what the Justice Department did, irregardless of whether he knew it or not. I mean, this was a criminal enterprise that killed people, killed one of our border agents, and whether he knew about it or not, he refuses to accept accountability for his own program, his own department.
Yeah, and he sits there and he says, there's a fairness component to all of this, that I should be held accountable for what's factually correct and not politically desired. I've got to ask you, did you get the questions you asked answered?
Yeah, I primarily wanted to know from him because they kept talking about, there's no difference between Wide Receiver, which was the program during the Bush administration, and Fast and Furious. And there are major differences. But what they are purposely trying to do is blur that line. And, Ginny, you and I have talked before.
Yes.
It's just like this president. This president doesn't take accountability for anything. Eric Holder does the same thing. And, again, when he spoke a few weeks ago and said, part of the reason he's being attacked is because, like Obama, he's a black man. That's just terrible.
Yeah. And then this whole, what do you think about the Democrats turning this, once again, this hearing into an issue about why we need stricter gun laws? And the reaction from Holder about the assault weapons ban question, about, it does need to be reinstated. What did that say to you?
Well, it scares us because there are many of us on our side who firmly believe that really was the genesis of this entire program to begin with, that the Obama administration basically turned its eyes from 2,000 guns, put them in the hands of Mexican drug cartels, so that ultimately this administration could say, as Eric Holder did today, see, we need tougher gun control laws.
Yeah, and he sure did. He said, hey, we're all for reinstating the assault weapons ban, and it certainly would have made an impact on what's going on in Mexico. But on this whole issue of documents, and Congressman Issa has made clear that he'll hold Holder in contempt of Congress. But, it doesn't sound like you're going to get the documents you want and need to see to find out what happened here.
This is pretty fundamental. If someone's not cooperating, one can only think they're hiding or covering something up. And it's the gulf between what Eric Holder and his Justice Department has turned over to the Inspector General, which is really his hand-picked investigator, And what he's turned over to us is so wide that you can't help but think they're hiding something. And I think Darrell Issa is going to do what he has to do, but I still think we're walking our way down a road to a special investigator on this.
Mm-hmm. And if they have nothing to hide, why won't they put an end to all of this back and forth about it and just give you the documents? And why do we have a member of the Department of Justice, he's now resigned, but pleading the fifth?
Yeah, that's what's always so troubling, and that's why this story won't go away, no matter how the Democrats just try to whitewash it, and no matter how Eric Holder tries to just poo-poo everything. When you're hiding, when you're stonewalling, you're covering something up, and so it just begs for further investigation.
Yeah, and can you imagine how the Terry family must feel watching what they saw today?
Your heart just goes out, because I've still never heard this man, Eric Holder, express any remorse for Brian Terry's death, any apology for what happened to him. It's just so insensitive.
It is, and just like you said in the hearing today, well, Agent Dotson, he can call me.
That way, Jenny, that was amazing when he said that. He can call me. He's got my cell phone or something like that.
Yeah.
That's just frightening.
And it really does. It shows how detached he is from what we're talking about here and why Americans are concerned. And it was just like Congresswoman Burkle said, this is a top issue for constituents in my area. I mean, are you hearing the same thing from?
Yeah, Ginny, I'm going to go home this weekend, and I'm going to have a couple town halls. And like every town hall I have, I'm going to be asked 100 questions about this.
Yeah.
So this is front and center. Americans are real concerned, and this needs to be investigated.
Yeah, and you wonder, I know that Eric Holder didn't like being asked, where's the president on this? He didn't like being asked, how come he hasn't come? But where is President Obama on this? And don't you think this needs to be something that becomes a campaign issue?
It's just, yes, and it will. And the more that they try to cover this up, the bigger the issue will become. It just didn't seem credible to us that Eric Holder has never really talked to Janet Napolitano or Hillary Clinton or even Barack Obama about this. It just doesn't make sense.
But before I let you go, do you think more hearings are the answer, or you got to go another route?
No, I think we've had hearings now enough. I think the next step now is to look. We're in a search for answers. The American people deserve answers. So now we have to turn up the heat a little bit. If Mr. Holder won't reveal these documents that we've requested, I think we have to hold him in contempt, and I think we have got to have an independent investigation. He can't have the Inspector General investigate him. There's got to be an independent tool here.
Yeah. Do you see a political divide, though, within your committee? I mean, was it pretty obvious today?
There's pretty strong consensus on our side, no matter how much some of us feel like Eric Holder needs to resign, and there are over 100 of us that have called for it. I mean, Ginny, think about that. I can't remember the last time 100 members of the House called for a cabinet-level person's resignation. So even some of the more moderate members on the Republican side are very troubled by the lack of cooperation we've been getting.
But the Democrats, and they seem to be saying, okay, so this happened, we got to figure out how can we give ATF the authority and the tools they need.
What they want to do, Jeannie, is they want to just right away move on.
Yep.
Okay, how can we fix this?
Yep.
The Bush administration did this. The Obama administration did this. All God's children do this. Okay, now let's fix it.
Yeah.
They don't want to look into where this attorney general did wrong and where justice did wrong, and why, again, I go back to Brian Terry, why we have a dead border security agent.